So welcome everybody, session number 2, Impossible Decisions Workshop. Impossible in the sense that we're going to try and make it hard, but it should be amusing at the same time. It's a tabletop exercise. We're getting into the practice. If you attended session number 1, which was fast and furious also, there was a lot of theory that was passed on. We're going to cover back the subject as much as we can. Thank you, GCBR, Marina, and the crowd over there for supporting all of this and putting us all together. This is very, very appreciated. Today, the goal is to go straight into practice and the tabletop exercise after a minimal aspect of governance, including why should we play and why do we play tabletop exercises, a little recap on the incident management tying into the BCP and DRP, and then some rules, and then we play. So why tabletop exercises and what is it? Basically, it's a scenario. It's paper-based. Most of the time, the military does it like this. If you've been into one of these, usually it's played on paper with no screens, with no technology. We put people with sometimes different mindsets in the room, and we challenge all ourselves together with those questions to prepare ourselves for real life aspects of incident management. It's facilitated, it's controlled, so that we keep on the track and we address the topics we want to address. And the goal is to build synergy. The goal is to practice those reflex muscles in a convenient and friendly environment. And the fun thing is, the good thing is, it's not happening for real. Good afternoon, good morning, Kim, if you just joined. Christopher, also, I just saw. So we're just starting and getting into the why and what is it, tabletop exercises. So basically, we're preparing ourselves for those kind of events on paper, practicing the decision-making muscles. And let's have fun with this because it's not happening for real this time. So again, the why, we hear more and more enterprise corporations want it. They want the tabletop exercises because it's good practice, because it's good that people collaborate and it builds synergy. And more and more and more, it's getting into obligatory territory. Insurers are asking for the plans to be tested. It doesn't always mention tabletop exercises as the format, but it really says that the plan needs to be tested, and those things are starting to be audited. Of course, to this crowd, there's no surprise, and the regulatory frameworks also start to mandate it. Testing the plan and the tabletop exercise is one of those very, 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 very good way to test the plan in parallel with audits. So that's why we're here. No surprise to you guys. The way we address incident management, there's not a single format for incident management, but the way we like to address it and the way we built it into our practice at Breach Commander over the last 20 years, we assigned 3 roles inside the organization. Basically, someone in charge that we call the commander. You can call him or her the lead or the person in charge. And that person has 2 subordinates, collaborators. One is on the technical side, which we call the technical lead, and the other one is the business lead, dealing with everything more businessy in essence. And those 3 people, the main lead and the technical and the business lead, are usually enough as a delegation model to then delegate other aspects and bring the right people to the table. Of course, it's a very simple model to start with. But when you have those people that you can delegate to in the different scopes, often worldwide, where an incident can happen, usually you're able to use them into delegating and bringing the right people. So myself or yourself as the person in charge, the commander, doesn't need to know who's who in the zoo and all the technical people for such a scope in another country, on another continent. You would not need to know that. Even if the list exists, ideally, you have those people you can rely on, call the shots, delegate activities or pass orders, and those people should be able to find who needs to be brought to the table furthermore. So usually it works pretty well in those aspects. Legal counsel, legal auditor, and other specialties are roles that we invite on an ad hoc basis when they're needed. Of course, the auditing usually happens after the fact, and the legal counsel, depending on your processes and depending on where we are and the flavor of an incident, perhaps the legal counsel could be invited earlier on to bring in um, the secret and the privilege and those aspects that lawyers care about, of course. And we too. Criticality level. Today we're going to address it on 4 levels, but basically I like to approach incident management on 3 levels. So from the lowest level, which is the highest number, so 3 as a low, 2 as a medium, 1 as a high. And you can play on this and add other levels if you want, like a 4 for something that is insignificant or very, very low priority, and priority 0, which would be critical, which we're going to use today. Whatever how you name it and the numbering you put into this, there's usually levels at which you want to quantify and qualify your incident so that everybody knows what is expected of them in terms of mobilization, in terms of synergy, in terms of speed, the priority of the event. So today we're gonna play on low, medium, high, and maybe we're gonna get onto critical. And these are also the levels that we use into Breach Commander. The governance, all that was passed on during the first session. So again, we're going to tap into questions that lead to BCP, DRP, so the disaster recovery, the business continuity, and of course the incident management, which are in real life dependent on one another, in some aspects intertwined, if they exist. So we're going to ask those questions because they're all core to what we're doing. It's always about risk and continuity of the business during an incident. The first 72 hours, we mentioned that also. So there's many, many steps that should be done. And those steps, most of the time, are not technical. In essence, technical people are usually very good at dealing with the technical aspects. So they usually start dealing with that. But soon enough, we need to deal with all those aspects that are easy to forego and forget. So we're gonna try to address that as soon as possible, also into our dealings. And one of the challenges we see in incident management in itself is making decisions, debating, calling the shots based on imperfect, sometimes absent information. Sometimes there's no good decision to make or take. And it's very important to document the why we made a decision, how we got to those decisions, to be able to explain it in the future. So those issues of tracking, really making sure that we document everything, are not necessarily challenges and issues for the now. They're issues for the future, because at some point somebody's going to ask questions out of context when the dust has settled and everything is back to normal, hopefully. And those questions usually hurt because looking back retrospectively, sometimes it doesn't look good. But at the moment where it happened, it was not good. So tracking and documenting are very key, especially for the future, for due diligence, for audits, for regulations, and also more in the now. It's about getting an idea of where we are, what's happening as a real-time snapshot, and that's one of the things we try to do on paper, and we automated with Breach Commander so that you don't have to write another email at 3 o'clock in the morning. The stakeholders can just go in and see the automated summary, the automagic summary, and know where they are. So less manual reporting. Before we jump in, that's a lot of words, I know. Rules of engagements, very simple. We're here as a team. If we were physically in the same room, we would probably be from the same organization. Today we're not, so I invite you to think and debate everything in the perspective of if you had to do it into your own organization, into your own life. And we're also going to tie all this around a virtual organization that we're going to see in a moment. It's not a test, it's not an exam, so there's no wrong answer into this. There's not a single format. And the goal is to start the debate and train the reflex muscles, as we said. Let's get comfortable. Of course, you're professional, so you respect other people's opinion. Share your knowledge as much as you can, if not today and now, perhaps retrospectively or in the next sessions that will come, because ideally we're going to run with the GCBR more sessions like this, not only through me, but next time it may be you in front of the camera. And most important of all of this, let's have some fun with this because it's not happening for real. Today, we're playing with a simulated victim that we call Greenbit Alliance. So it's an invented organization, and we want to set a scope like this so that you have it in mind when we play. It's an organization that makes quite a lot of money annually, so in the multiple tens of millions. It's got close to 5,000 employees, high dependency on technology and digital stuff. It's got a footprint that spans the whole world with multiple tens of sub-entities, mergers and M&As like some of those big companies grow. So it's very spread out. And with the spread, with the complexity of a worldwide footprint, comes a challenge, which is organizational before it is technical, and the two overlap. In terms of cyber posture, as any big company of this size, they have some maturity. HQ is very mature, but when we get into the branches and the ramifications worldwide, especially with those mergers of companies that are not onboarded, not on the same technology standards, it can create chaos very, very quickly when we ask questions and when we try to interact with all of them on different time zones. The format of the play is very, very, very simple. So we're going to show on screen events and injects like this with a very brief timeline at the top that keeps you on track with the time and where we are, etc. And there's questions that will be asked or suggested for if I take a business perspective or if I take a technical perspective. Today we're gonna insist a little bit less on the technical aspects, but we left those questions there so that they stay into the recording, and that if you want to talk or discuss or think technical today, those questions may be of interest to you. Of course, those are very, very handpicked questions. There's many other questions that may be asked, and that's why I welcome you to stay open mic and open camera and make this a discussions should you guys feel like it.
Breach Commander is a unified platform to lead, coordinate, and document cyber incidents from the first alert to the final report. It brings business leaders, technical teams, legal advisors, executives, and any other internal or external stakeholders into one controlled incident workspace with role-based playbooks, decision tracking, SLA timers, audit-ready logs, and structured reporting. Instead of managing a crisis through ad hoc meetings, scattered emails, disconnected chats, messy spreadsheets, and improvised slide decks, Breach Commander gives organizations a single operational cockpit where leaders can focus on decisions while the incident story writes itself.
Now allow me the pleasure to take you through a quick demonstration of Breach Commander. At this point, I was already connected and browsing through the analytics area. When you first log in, the main landing page is the dashboard. It gives you an overview of your active cases and basic analytics on what's happening across the environment. On a good day, this page should be very quiet. Ideally, there would be no open cases and no impact markers lighting up the map. But when you suspect that an incident may be unfolding, the process starts very simply. You click on New Case and you complete the case creation form. I will set Greenbit as the affected organization. I'll keep the auto-generated case name that you could change if you wanted to. I'll set the initial severity to low until we know more. And since this is a tabletop exercise, I'll mark it as such by clicking the box, which means it will not pollute the real-life incident metrics, which is important when we do training. Then I'll assign the key roles, the commander, the technical lead, the business lead, and the legal counsel. We'll see later on what the legal counsel can do within a case. And then submit. Once inside a case, the central point of focus is the interview. This interview guides the team through the incident response process step by step, using dynamic questions and actions. Each interview step also includes supplemental hints to support the assigned user. For every step, the assigned person can upload files, add comments, and document known costs when relevant. Steps can also be delegated from the main stakeholders to other users as needed. If the answer is not available yet, the step can be snoozed rather than guessed or ignored. It's also possible to add steps manually and assign them to the user of your choice. This is useful when something important comes up during the crisis that was not already covered by the structured flow. All the steps in the interview are tied to management playbooks. With a simple click on the playbook name on the right, you can see where the current step sits in the broader response structure by browsing the playbook graph. If a user needs to brainstorm, clarify a point, or get more guidance on a specific step, they can use our AI butler for private support. At the top, you have the case details dashboard. Just below it, you have the current case summary. Those two combined give any stakeholder an always fresh snapshot view of where the case stands. This keeps case followers fully autonomous and avoids time-consuming status emails and calls. Breach Commander also includes two independent chat rooms, one for business coordination and one for technical coordination. Everything discussed in those chats will get picked up and reflected back into the evolving main summary. And then you can see the magic just there. Notice that just a few seconds after the discussions have happened in the chat, the critical details have been already represented in the main summary. At the bottom of the interview, you will find previous steps that have already been answered or snoozed, along with a mini timeline of the latest recorded activity. From there, or from the main menu, you can access the full case timeline. The left menu gives you another way to access the main functions we've already discussed, including the Master Playbook Launcher. Whenever help is needed, the support menu is always available. Each registered participant should have received an invitation to join the GCBR training environment. Should you need any help getting in, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. Now I invite you to open your own practice case and follow along as we move through the exercise. So it was a quiet Thursday. Greenbit has been very busy for the past year with all those M&As and those activities happening. So we're at the verge of a long weekend that people haven't waited for. And hopefully people will have some vacations. So we are on this Thursday, end of the day, 16:45. Slow burn here. A salesperson says that the CRM is not working well, the page freezes, and they get logged out. It can happen. One of the questions we'd like to ask in those aspects is, do we have a clear process to track IT issues like this? I would assume that for more mature companies, organizations, that answer would be a yes. IT ticketing system, IT incident management, ITSM, et cetera, et cetera. But it's not always that clear for different companies. And something as small as a crown jewel is failing in some aspects, may not get all the attention that could be deserved in those aspects. Question to ask in here: what kind of resilience would business stakeholders in terms of risk management and resilience hear about this if it's just an IT mishap? Sometimes it does not, even if it's a critical asset. So if you ask me, critical assets are critical for a reason. It should involve more people, but of course it could create noise also. So questions to ask to yourself. So how would this be treated? Would it go beyond IT? Most of the time, when I say IT, lots of respect for IT, but IT make things work most of the time. Well, as cyber or cybersecurity has the other end of the spectrum where they try to secure things and functionality is not the core philosophy mindset. So the two are not opposite, but they're not necessarily coming from the same angle. Making work versus securing, there's often challenges. We're still on a Thursday afternoon, close to 5 o'clock in the PM. More reports about the CRM malfunctioning that happens, and it seems to be affecting most of European users. Questions for the organizations in general. How much tolerance would we have for IT issues on a critical asset? Well, depends on the organization, but I would hope that would get escalated fast. But it's Thursday 5 p.m. So who knows? Who decides what's acceptable? Typically, that would be part of an uptime SLO and performance metrics for the organization, but it's not always that easy. So where do we draw the line? Always a challenge there. Slow burn, we're moving on. So at some point, there's a VP that escalates. You would expect that. It's after hours, it's 5:37 p.m., depending on when the company finishes to work. Escalates the CEO saying, hey, we've got big onboarding of customers and clients into the CRM. So CRM meaning all the data and the customer platform. We need that to work. So can we do something? So pressure rises very quickly, as you would expect. So always knowing that we're on the verge of a long weekend coming up. I mentioned this because it's those human aspects, right? Vacations and long weekends make a difference in people's lives. And most of the time, the excitation and people that have put vacations and days off already, so people are already on vacations in their head, and it's normal. You would expect that. So in my experience, those moments, Christmas time is the same, summer vacation. So they always put a stress on the company. You would hope that everything goes well. Well, in this case, it seems we're getting down some slide here. So would it change the plan in terms of management? So you're calling the shot, it's your organizations, or you're a stakeholder with a say in those aspects. Would it change how you approach everything? It's still early. We don't know that much, but we can feel the pressure is building on, right? So what kind of discussions would we be having after hours on a Thursday here? So the CM vendor has been contacted by IT. Of course, something is not working, so we're supported in that aspect. So CRM 8, so the little name does cremate, so we made it on purpose. So that's something made up. So we're taking the heat from cremate, and they're asking to restart the CRM. So we're after hours. It's close to 7 p.m. on a Thursday, so seems legitimate in those aspects. One of the questions I'm asking myself in those aspects, like, okay, yeah, reboot to fix again. So that's very typical. So something's not working, so we're going to reboot the system. Most of the time, yes, that's one of the solutions that happens. So our vendor, from whom we're supported, is proposing that. You would hope, after having done a lot of procurement debates and participating in those contracts, you would hope that what's been put into the procurement contract some years ago would deal with those aspects. Because you're rebooting my CRM, you're trying to fix something, but it's after hours. So let's hope that the conditions and who's going to pay for this and the support we're going to get is on par with the criticality of the system. And by experience, and I don't know for you guys, but it's not often the case because those contracts are negotiated on the side of the table by people who do everything they can. But if a clause is a trick, if a clause is not necessarily honest or just half truth, how would you know as a lawyer, as a risk manager, as a CFO approving those things, depending on the company? So you would hope that that Cremate was honest into their procurement and that all of this will be dealt with, ideally with no more fees, no supplemental bill on the next Monday, and with speed. Speed. I don't know if you guys dealt with Cisco for networking and firewalls in the last 20 years, but it's pay to play, right? You want good service and support, you got to pay for this. Of course, there's a cost, but when you need support, you need support. So a change like this, rebooting the CRM, of course, it's after hours, but somebody needs to call the shots in that aspect. So it's not always a trivial thing to do, right? Who do I communicate with? Is there any users that needed to work and that had critical work open? In this case, it seems that the CRM was not working, so people were not able to get in. So there's a lot of questions to ask about, okay, do we do this? How quickly do we do this? And what kind of communication should we do here? You would assume that IT has an emergency change or action process for those aspects because it needs to be tracked. So up to now, we're kind of in a process that we would expect, right? Anybody wants to jump in with anything? It's the slow burn, so it's going to move faster now. So close to 8 o'clock, so 20 to 8 on that Thursday. CM's been restarted and it seems to be working back now. So all good, right? What would you expect and what would you do into your aspects after a circumstance like this? So definitely, we don't want that to happen again. It happened. So what are the odds that it would fail again as we're all going into a long weekend? So it's the kind of things that are it's not corporate, it's not process in essence. It's about we just want it to be very quiet so that people can rest, right? So please, CRM, bear with us and just work. What kind of records and what kind of information would we need and would we track from Cremate? You would expect that the vendor is open and gives you the timings, gives you the information you need to say, hey, we rebooted at that time for that reason. And by the way, we did some checks and figured out the reason. I would assume IT would ask those questions. Please, Kim.
Uh, I, I'm sorry, and you may have said this, that we weren't going to be terribly technical, but did we assume or not that there is IT service management and IT operations that's looking at this from at least a problem management point of view? So even if we haven't yet decided whether this is cyber oriented, there should be somebody who's looking at this problem on behalf of the business even after hours, whether they're a call out, whether they're a service provider, whether there's, somebody that gets escalated call that there's a problem and is working with Cremate, right? Is Can we assume that there's somebody doing that and capturing that information?
So on my behalf, I will say yes. So
Okay,
assuming
great.
that Greenbit as a company has a mature IT, mature doesn't mean that they cover everything. It's not perfect,
Yeah,
but you
I
would
know.
assume that they have, you would know it's worldwide, it's
I know.
distributed and
I've worked as a CISO for large organizations. I get it, right? So it's a loaded question,
It
but
is.
for a large multinational company that it is global with the number of employees that they've got and the number of things that they've got, even if they're relying on old stuff or they're going the cheap way and not paying a lot to their service providers, they probably have some IT people on their own side because somebody has got to be interfacing with all these service providers. And those elements should be doing their job. If we're going to assume that they exist, that's fine, because we can just say that some of these things, like what logs, timestamps, technical changes should be preserved, should be outlined in those tickets, right? Or in those problems that they're handling. But part of escalating what manifests as a problem into a possible cyber incident is having that basic problem management in the IT domain to begin with. If the organization doesn't have that, I think we should be told that that's the assumption. So I just wanted to know which way are we assuming? Are we assuming that we have an IT service team that is interfacing with Cremate, or are we assuming that we're less mature than that?
You have my vote, and I'll let Christopher
Great. Thanks.
feedback on this.
Thank you. Wouldn't the creation of a security case, wouldn't that initiate all those steps?
Well, I'll just say Christopher. Are you Chris or Christopher?
Chris is fine, thank you.
Okay, Chris. I would just say that yes, it could if it manifests itself as a clearly having a cyber-related cause first or cyber-related impact. But in reality, in lots of organizations, these things actually start out looking like, oh, people can't log in, so something is broken. Something isn't working. The CRM doesn't work. We need to call the vendor so that they can restart it because it might be an application problem. And in many cases, this is why the cyber team need to be across problem management. So when I've run as a CISO in large distributed organizations, my one of the things that was a very important objective was for my cyber team to actually have access to all technical problems in that queue so that they could actually be whoever was on call was monitoring that and they were part of those resolution teams so that they could quickly chime in and say, oh, this looks like it could be a cyber incident, or it has a cyber impact, or it could have a cyber cause. But in actuality, many of these problems actually occur as IT manifest, I'll just say, as IT problems before the organization realizes. And it could be anything from a network outage, from like we could go on. I don't want to say more than that, except that it ideally needs to work both ways, but it is not always the case that the cyber incident or that the cyber causes present themselves clearly first.
Music to my ears. Really, 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 really.
A decade
Yes,
of experience as a CISO, sorry. Sorry.
absolutely. So you felt that fragmentation between IT and cyber, right? And the need for cyber to
Oh,
say,
yeah.
hey, you know what? It starts as a slow burn, something's not working.
Yep.
It's a critical asset, so we should track
Yep.
that, right?
Yep, absolutely. Now, the fact is that when you have cyber monitoring and you've got cyber detection, if you have, and you're monitoring for intrusions and you've got a SOC, you're actually looking for cyber related things. And so if you see those, then you need to connect the dots with any ongoing problems that the IT team is working on that they may not realize has cyber cause. So it does need to be a two-way street. And everybody is looking at their own things. But the way that this event was presented was problem, IT problem. Something doesn't work. It wasn't cyber, it wasn't the SOC has detected an attack. And so I think it is important for us to understand that that's what the scenario has presented us to work with first.
Fantastic. You have my vote. Other people can jump in as you wish. So that was very well expressed by Kim. So we presented it as a slow burn, and it started as, hey, something's not working in IT, so please fix it, right? It's just functional. It's not a cybersecurity problem. But as we'll see, it it can degenerate very, very quickly. I just clicked on the next slide. So the system has been rebooted. All's good, right? So in this case, we will expect that IT, we will assume that IT has been tracking this formally, and that the cyber people, the cyber security, the SecOps, have access to that queue. Will they look? Will they see? Is there just a junior level 3 analyst on call at that point, out of India, out of the Brazil, out of Canada? Who knows? It's those aspects where they can track it, they should track it, but will they have the reflexes to understand what's going on, especially at that stage, because it's still early. But again, Kim, you've probably saw this also. My SOC has
Absolutely.
their eyes on that screen. They should be able to see that something's not right, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and they should, and this is the learning curve, right, for the organization on both sides is making sure people are asking those questions. So, I always would ask my SOC, well, when you see something and you need to be asking yourself, what could that be? Why is this?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So in that case, we will assume that IT is tracking it, that the SOC has competent analysts on call,
Okay.
and looking at the consoles, and they've seen that normal operations has been resumed. Increased monitoring is considered. So by increased monitoring, onboarding new logs and stuff like that can take time, but just put your eyes on the console and keep your ears and eyes open for more issues about the CRM is an order that's been passed to our SOC people. So, how do we feel in terms of management? Well, that should be reassuring for now. Let's hope. Thursday is done, so we're still in the first week. So, chapter two, the fix perhaps did not fix everything. So, Friday morning started well. People are still looking forward to their long weekend. The CRM is working, pressure drops. So, during that morning, um, the applications team, because a CRM is easy to state as a concept, but usually those things are monsters, right? You've got databases, you've got middleware, you've got front ends, it interfaces with clients, and you've got Power BI, and it goes into Azure, and all of that is cloud-based, hybrid, all those nightmare buzzwords we can tell in one sentence without taking a breather. So um, the applications team is looking at their stuff, and they kind of notice, oh, we've got issues, boss, with logs. It seems we've got blackouts of logs that last from a short minute to multiple minutes, and it's been lasting for a month. So clearly, this is not normal. What do we do with this? So now we have a situation where, okay, it seems the CRM on one end had availability and performance issues, degradation issues that can happen. But then looking more at everything, we seem to be dropping logs. Not good. Again, maybe it's not alarming for now, but I would assume the security people aligned with the operational SecOps and DevSecOps people with IT, depending on the companies, right? They may be completely different people, different departments in different countries. Ideally, all those people would be friends and working together in the same office. In startups, it works like this when you have the same people doing everything. But as Kim and you other people on this call, it's usually not the case, right? The application people, and again, it's delegated to external vendors at so many level. So something like that, what do I do with this? So now the question is, what would this trigger? And this is a loaded question. This is where, Kim, you hinted at. You would expect that at this point, a situation like this would spin up a firm cyber security, or let's call that cyber incident that goes beyond IT functioning. We have a risk situation here. You would
Yeah.
expect.
Oh, my question is shown on the bottom of the technical thing, which is, what do we mean by log blackout? Does it look like someone's tampered with the logs? Has deleted them? I'd be looking at permissions, and who has the ability to actually access logs and tamper with them or make changes to them, which
Absolutely.
actually it should not be the case, right? That it should not be allowed It should not be allowed that anyone can delete or change logs. But
Absolutely, ma'am.
seeing
Absolutely.
seeing that it has, we have a problem.
We have a problem. In one company I did back in the days, we were ingesting logs at a level that was it went beyond my mind. I mean, it was multiple tens of thousands of events per second, critical events going into the pipe, and each of them as critical events were critical in essence. It was privilege access management logins, identities, the functionings of applications, so everything that was very, very core to cyber investigations and cyber use cases. I mean, the pipe was this big, and it meant that all of those events needed to be transmitted correctly from all of those distributed systems and end up in the same database without anyone missing. So one log missing from that pipeline could have meant a big difference into an investigation should we had to investigate it in that aspect. Multiple minutes of logs missing and everything. So it doesn't say is it back into the SIM or the data lake where it goes, or is it internal to the application? But somebody
No.
scratched the surface and it doesn't look good. And as you said, it should not be a manual intervention. Deleting logs should not happen.
No, well, I mean, I really what should happen here is there should be some discussions about and investigations into what this might mean and whether it's a significant event that justifies declaring that there is whether it's cyber or whether it's accidental, it needs to be investigated either way. Now,
Absolutely. We need to track.
what we haven't said here, though, is that we have a service provider, and it's possible that the audit logs are actually generated or by the service provider, and so that would require discussions with the service provider.
Very well said. We have Sarah in the chat that says generally issues like described should be defined in an IT service catalog, which is shaped in a process-oriented application. If not available, the process should be available for staff who are reachable for the right triage and definition of the responsible role. Absolutely, music to my ears and eyes here. In a mature company, and especially when there's a big vendor with big money behind, because Cremate seems to be a CRM vendor, so you would expect that they have maturity, and the procurement on our side did diligent work and to keep them dang honest. So yes, absolutely. And the process on our end, missing logs is usually not a use case I see defined in technical console. So when we talked about Breach Commander, again, when we track everything on paper, managing the things is really different than the technical alerts and the technical response. The two are intertwined and correlate, should correlate, but I don't deal myself with the technical escalations of alerts from the SIM or the SOC and stuff like that. But in terms of tracking, whether it's on paper or through Breach Commander, the questions we may ask, missing logs is a very, very specific kind of use case, right? Does it happen? Yes, it does. It probably happens more than we think. But it's usually not something I see in BCPs, DRPs, and IRPs where something starts when people look at logs and say, oh, logs are missing. So in this case, we have a very good person that figured out that we have blackouts that shows perhaps as pits and drops in a graph. So that's very nice that people saw this, because the problem with missing something is that it's missing. So making proof of something missing, proving absence is usually very, very, very tough in terms of forensics. So we have a keen eye person over there.
I think that the whole log thing is very interesting, right? Because really it says periodic blackouts. I guess I'm assuming that that's a gap in the logs. There should be stuff in there and there's not. And that should be considered to be suspicious and it needs to be investigated. So, are we investigating it yet?
Yeah, that's where we're going. So that's a good segue. So whether you're tracking with Breach Commander or your mental notes, that's the moment where you would open a case if it's not open yet, a cybersecurity incident management case. Okay. And in Breach Commander, that would happen with You go into the menu, click new case, and then you get into a new case, and then you have an interview. And bear in mind, the interview will go through the generic interview because it doesn't assume what's happening, but it leads you very, very quickly into defining, okay, the basic questions that should be asked. Am I allowed to do this? Is there something that's happening? Is it just false positive? Not always easy to answer, but let's answer them first, and then we're gonna deal with the technical aspects soon enough because the interview is gonna go into playbook. It's gonna ask, do we have control on the technologies at stake here, or is it something completely external, like a domain being spoofed, a domain being registered in your name, which spoofs your name? That's just something you have control over most of the time, besides a takedown, your DPS and all those other takedowns, which are kind of painful to do. So depending on where you go, there's a full three of close to 1,000 questions that are asked of you. And we try to open as few as possible until you click yes or unknowns on those aspects. And if the playbook doesn't show before your eyes, and I know I've chosen a case in here which is not dealt with by Breach Commander right now. Missing logs is not a question we ask, but that's something you can input by yourself, and then you document the investigation either as comments into the tool or through the chats, because you would expect that people mentioning missing logs for that amount of time in that system and those logs of that severity, blah, 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 compared to the graph. So all of that would end up into your story that you retell and which is your main investigation track. So on that aspect, at this point, we will assume that the cybersecurity team opened a low incident in terms of severity. It's not insignificant, but it's low for now, pending more investigation. It's a critical asset. It's suspicious. It's just after a reboot because of degradation. So it's weird. And it's Friday. It's 2 p.m. before that long weekend. So Cremate, the vendor, has investigated the logs blackout, and they cannot explain, unfortunately. So, of course, we're alone in this world. It never happened, didn't happen to their other customers, and it happens to us. Why is that? I do not know, but it makes it painful, and sometimes that's what life is. Their proposal after that investigation is to take the CRM offline for a security investigation. So offline meaning not available, and knowing that the salespeople have some big events just after the weekend, of course they're not going to be happy. And they're saying that the downtime may last for up to 2 days, so 36 to 48 hours, because of triage and forensics. So when we say triage in my language, that would be light forensics, where we try to define what's going on. Like you go to the hospital, you're getting triage. So a basic assessment of your conditions before digging deeper. That's the proposal that they're doing. What do we think of this in those moments? So I'll let you feedback very quickly, but again, we know that sales have pressure. We know it's a critical asset. We know it's just before a long weekend. How do we call the shots on this? So who approves this? You would expect that it would be part of the approval process. What does it say? Because when I see a vendor wanting to do forensics into my systems that they support, my brain goes straight to procurement and say, let's hope forensics and cyber incidents were part of this. Otherwise, I can see money going out the door very quickly. I'll let you
I,
feedback on this. I don't want to do all the talking.
I think there's a bigger problem here, though, and that is
Please.
who's going to make the decision, right? Because based on that, let's say that the business needs to make a decision. Can we tolerate having this taken offline? Whether by the service provider or ourselves doesn't really matter to business, right? It's really who approves taking a critical system offline. I agree. It's good to know what the contractor MSA says, and who's going to pay. But the important thing is, in order to inform the business adequately to make that decision, we need to have information to identify what the consequences will be by taking it offline, what the impact to the business might be by having the service provider do that unilaterally. And then also describe to the business what other options there are to be able to keep the business going, so a business continuity schema, in light of this problem. So I think that those discussions need to be held somewhere to be able to, and down technical, what alternatives could we propose? Why can't we simply log in and inspect everything? What evidence could be changed? Exactly. These need to be worked out in order to decide or provide advice for the business to decide. And ultimately, it's the business owner. Sorry, so it's not the service provider, but they, of course, have proposed. They haven't stated. And there's a lot of information that needs to be worked out very quickly at 2 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, before everybody clocks off, so this decision can be made.
Yeah. And it's not a pleasant decision, right? Because you've got the sales VP on your back saying, what's going on with my Monday morning onboarding? How would you feel about how confident would you feel about that Monday morning in those circumstances?
I believe in being honest about these things, but they're not easy decisions or discussions rather. They can be very, difficult discussions. But the team needs to be doing the work in the background to be able to inform the business owner about what the impact, consequences, options are, so that they can take the business owner on that journey, especially on a Friday at 2 p.m., which is not an uncommon situation. Cyber incidents often happen after hours.
It,
Unfortunately.
it also, to add to that, it depends on like the business continuity plan will inform you what the criticality of that system is, right? And then it's that conversation with the business, like what's the most convenient time to take this down? If it is like Friday and you don't work Saturday and Sunday, then that's 48 hours that you don't need the system up live because you don't need it. But if you're in a hospital and the CRM system is a hospital, then obviously that's 24/7. So then you've got a different problem. And the business continuity plan should also have the backup or the manual solution for the CRM system included, whether that is taking a report off of your CRM system to get critical data, whether that's telling your salespeople to take manual logs to update the CRM system afterwards, or have a look at what's going on in the business in terms of, are they in the middle of some real critical thing that they need the CRM system or certain bits of data for that CRM system for the next like 3 weeks or something. So it's more of an open dialogue to have a conversation with them and decide as a business what the best solution is.
I totally agree with that, Paul. I would just say that also, as you're outlining that, thinking ahead, that basically handing this over to the service provider to be able to do that for 36 to 48 hours, they're going to use all the time on the weekend, right? Let's,
Yeah.
if we assume that we don't need this on the weekend, nobody's going to be logging into it. 36 to 48 hours is going to use the whole weekend, which means that this problem is going to exist probably on Monday morning.
Yeah.
And especially since they can't explain the audit log blackouts. Now, they're probably behind the scenes trying to figure out, oh, what the hell happened here? Because they're now in the hot seat, right? And so what they're trying to do is buy for time. And Greenbit has some tough decisions to make, and it involves absolutely, pulling out the business continuity plan, making sure that we've got all those things done, and we know what all those things are. It's just shaping like up like an interesting Friday afternoon. Someone's going to have to stay late.
And
Unfortunately. Yeah, please go ahead. Go ahead, Paul.
And also, in my experience, I mean, vendors saying 36 to 48 hours, they're pretty confident at that timeline. And how much confidence have you got with that supplier, and how frequently do
Exactly.
they stick to their deadlines? I've had vendors that like running a phone system that have said, we'll sort it out in an hour. And they said that 5 times in a row. So we were 5 hours
Mhm.
down, and our backup phone system only took half an hour to implement. But everyone was like, no, they just said they'll be back up in an hour. And like 5 hours later, we'd had no phone calls all day. So it's like, what is that vendor like, and what's your sort of what
Mhm.
is the backup plan, and how long does that take to implement, and how bad is it, or how bad will your minimum service level get, kind of thing.
Yep, that's right. And so I think those are all part of the discussions that need to be worked out with the with all the techos, and then somebody to put that, business spin on all of that to take to the business so they can make a suitable decision and authorize whatever they're going to authorize.
And ensure that you're talking to your comms team so that they'll be able to tell you how the public will respond to what's going on, and what else is happening in the world, or if this is a CRM system that multiple companies use, are you the biggest user of the system that's going to be impacted by it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's very well said. So again, it's business tough, even if right now Cremate is in the hot seat, but it's not technical tough. It's business stuff. I mean, we got to call the shots,
Mhm.
and it's about humans and risk and perception. That's what makes it tough being a CISO, because you got to speak technical, but it's so business all the time. It's
Mhm.
probably 90% business, if not more, in my experience. And I don't want to speak for you, Kim. So
That's
in
true.
here. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So it's so business oriented, and that's why the meme on the internet, right? The CISO being now allowed to sit at the big guy's table, where the CISO used to be relegated to the kids' table,
Yeah.
and now at some point it's like, yeah, come and sit with us, please, Mr. and Mrs. VP, because we want to hear what you're saying. 10 years ago, still it was not the case. The CISO being under some kind of CFO in most organizations because of how organization evolve, and the CIO being the boss of the CISO. So I don't want to digress too much. I think the CISO should have more power in most organizations instead of being relegated under IT. But I digress. It's my personal bias for the CISOs. We're playing on words here about forensics, and why should it not be just an IT investigation? And when I say just an IT investigation, always with lots of respect, it's just the IT perspective is very different than the forensicators perspective. IT, you're trying to make things work. Unless you're a forensicator, you don't have the tools and the methodology to deal with evidence that may be ephemeral, and your only chance, one opportunity to capture it before it's gone. When you're talking about logs, you're talking about RAM, you're talking about network connectivity. So the forensicators approach to an investigation is very different. So that was the loaded question on the previous slide. Sorry. Why cannot we just send IT people saying, okay, just go in and try and figure it out? It's usually one of the first things that happens before myself as a forensicator or the SOC and the SecOps people get involved. Not all SecOps have forensicators with the investigative police mindset behind that, but the point remains: if we get into a system and start just flipping everything, trying to look at what's going on, accessing logs and flipping consoles and rebooting and changing files and everything. I had a case quite recently where the guy, a very well-intentioned IT guy, AD administrator, he was doing Active Directory management for a living. He got into the system, and at some point, he just wanted to get rid of that window of the logs that was in front of him. And instead of just closing the window, he said yes to erase all logs. And that happened. He had a Microsoft console with the logs, the event viewer opened, and in 2 clicks, because he was stressed, he said, click, I want to close. You're sure you want to delete all the logs, or erase, truncate the log file? And he said, yes, of course, get out of my. And then I get involved after, and I look at this and it's like, okay, the first event I see is event log reset. So it starts very bad for an investigation. That kind of situations, because of stress, because of the reflexes, because of the expertise of those different people, it's so diverse, it can happen, right? So that's why I would argue against treating those kind of events, especially when it stinks like a cyber thing like this. Put real forensics people, and let's take a step back before we get in, to make sure that we don't tamper with the evidence, because sometimes we may just have one shot. So that's why I'm playing on words here. So what's been agreed upon, because it was kind of radical what the cremate was proposing, our teams, internal teams, agreed to do a triage on the live system. But doing it properly with triage, you do it with forensics tool, with a forensics approach, making sure that we're not just doing IT stuff in there, always with great respect. And the real forensics, the deep dive, will be done on copies. Copies that are 3 days old, because of the backup system and the states of the different components. Because backing up is one part of the solution, but all of those different pieces of that CRM, the virtual machines, the database, the front end, the middleware, the BI that ties with it, having all of that synchronized and everything, it takes a little bit of magic when you try to make that work. And ideally, you have all that on the same time frame. So 3 days old for the backup. It's not a month old. It's not a week. It's 3 days. So we may be missing forensics artifacts that are earlier or fresher than 3 days, but it's a compromise, meaning the forensicator in that aspect, it's been delegated to cremate and their provider in the back end. That forensics will not need to do forensics on the live machines, meaning shutting down the VMs to be able to export the virtual disks and everything. They're going to do forensics off of backups, so to speak. So I'm trying to make it easier. So that's the kind of compromise they agreed upon. So live triage will happen on the live systems. And then forensics on the copies. We just need to send the copies to cremate. Would it be reassuring at this point? To your point, guys, I think the 36 to 48 hours commitment is a bit it's a bit motivated. It's a bit is it unrealistic? Not sure, but it's I think it's a bit of overcommitment in those aspects. And as you said, Paul, overcommitting on those aspects is always dangerous, because what happens in 48 hours, if you're not even done with your triage of all those systems, doing that remotely, it may well happen. So again, that's what they said. I would argue, as you said, all of you, that this should be a discussion. And to the sales team, what do we say to them? I don't think they should aim for their big event on that Monday using the CRM for clients onboarding and client critical tasks, because we don't know what's going to happen. And I, as an internal advisor in the company, I would say, you know what? No, 48 hours, maybe yes, maybe no, but I would not count on it. That would be my perspective at this point.
I think we can't guarantee what we're going to learn from the investigation. And so to the point of, do we tell them if this is a cyber investigation or a technical review? The answer is all the above. We can say, I'm going to make an assumption here, we can say tampering and deleting or tampering logs is against our policy. And so if we see that logs have been tampered and deleted, that is a problem that needs to be investigated, because it could indicate a bigger problem. It could indicate a breach, or that a threat actor has gotten into our CRM, and that would not be a good thing. So we need to actually carry out our investigation of whether this is technical or cyber oriented in such a way that we do not damage any potential evidence or data that we need in the future to pursue and to correct this problem. I think that's just a discussion with the business people, but then they need to be told there is a possibility that we will not be up on Monday. We're going to give it our go, but we can't guarantee.
Absolutely. And that VP is pushy. The sales VP, he's the big dog
Oh
in the
yeah,
room.
yeah, of course. And in which case, but after you start saying, look, it's not our policy to allow to change logs. That's for a good reason, to make sure that we can maintain the integrity of that, and that we don't have any breaches or any unauthorized disclosure of customer data, et cetera, which would be in a CRM, customer or business partner information. It could be quite important. And I think that a salesperson, is thinking, oh, I'm not going to be able to do my onboarding, but then's thinking, oh, but there's a bigger problem
Yeah,
here. And when we don't have a path forward yet, and here we are, at 4 or 5 p.m. on Friday. So, the business has to be understanding and allow the people who are going to figure out what's wrong and then what to do about it. They have to allow them to do their job.
I'm loving this. And as a CISO, did you have the opportunity? Were you brought to the table, invited into those meetings, or were you brought in after the
Sometimes.
fact in some? Yeah,
Oh no,
not always.
um, in cases where I've briefed boards when another part of our industry, not our organization, but somebody else was breached, and they had a board meeting and they were all worried. So they wanted that discussion about, you know, um, could that same thing happen to us? We had made some investments. The answer was no. In another organization, there were other, public sector organizations that had breaches that data had been disclosed, and they were extremely nervous. So yeah, there were a lot of frequent conversations about what do we know? When did we know it? What are we doing about it? And things like that. And these discussions always went quite high quite quickly, but by design, part of my job was to communicate with the executive team so that my team had top cover and could do their jobs because they needed to figure out so I was working both sides of it, but I didn't want the top people bothering the guys that are trying to figure out what the problem here is or investigate because um, that just is very disorderly.
Thank you. Thank you for all this. I was on the receiving end of that pressure of make it faster, that forensic. So having a CISO
Mm.
protecting us from that deluge of pressure is priceless. So thank you so much. Moving on into the essence of time. So it's been agreed triage will start. So the live triage will start at 7 p.m. on that Friday evening. Of course, CRM users will not be able to log in, but we're not shutting down the system. So I'm making a point here, and I want to digress too much. Not shutting down means we're preserving the volatile artifacts like network connections to the system, the RAM, so the volatile memory of the system, which is very, very, very critical should we expect something nefarious behind the scenes as a shutdown, depending on the types of shutdowns and if it's a virtual versus a physical machine. But I digress. Shutting down usually loses on some of those volatile artifacts because by nature they're volatile. So that's the kind of call where if I'm just looking at, hey, I'm trying to preserve everything, just shut everything down, there's more subtle ways to do this. But if you don't have the advisory in-house, it's getting better. I think with the CISOs being aware and the risk people understanding that more and more. But in the last 10 years, it progressed. But before that, it was about, okay, you've got a data leak, pull the cables, pull the plug, turn it off, remove the hard drives. Okay, there's more subtle ways to do this, unless we there's a fire or it mandates, but it has to be a discussion also. So sorry for the apartheid into this. So it's going to be the CRM will stay live so that the volatile elements will remain available. Just a quick view that we rendered to explain what the plan is. So from left to right, to right, one, two, three, we're going to do a live triage, which includes the volatile artifacts, like we said, active sessions, running processes, memory, network connectivity. It's a monster, a CRM most of the time. So front end, middleware, back end, databases, BI, and identity system. So it can be a spider and a big monster, unfortunately, in many companies, especially over time. And the forensics itself will happen at step 2 on the copies that have been taken 3 days ago as backups. These will be easier to send to the vendor without copying the disk or imposing that copy tax on the live system. So that's the deal. And then we need to send that to the external provider. It's still Friday. It's 8 p.m. So the CRM is offline. So the management calls the shot here with the information at hand. So what's known is known. The rest will come with the investigation. So they adjourn for the weekend. Tough questions come here. In terms of on call, who's working during the weekend? It's a long weekend. Vacations have most probably have already been put in. Seniority of the people. So there's a big HR element coming in those aspects. And one of the bones I'm throwing onto the table here is what about unions? I've dealt with companies where the unions were so powerful. A case like this, because vacations have been approved and everything, we've got a major crisis on our hands, which is not the case yet, but in our case, it was a crisis. The union came in and said, no, no, our people are not working during the weekend. What do we do with this?
That's again business, HR, get HR involved, get all these things worked out, get legal involved, um, to look at what to do. These are business decisions, right? And some I've worked in some organizations that were highly unionized and where workers walked out, and there it's really, really tough. Those are tough business circumstances to be able to deal in, especially when services have to continue, be provided. So whether it's a hospital where it's got, nurses on strike, or it's a
Oh,
water
yes.
utility where the engineers aren't going to do their job, um, it's very, very difficult to work on, and those decisions are not made in a vacuum because business will call on the experts who are responsible for those agreements, whether that's legal counsel, or whether that's HR. It depends.
Understood. Again, a very good point about making this a proactive integration into the union's discussions and debate, on-call work and everything, and the pay grade. So that's usually part of that, according to my experience. But crisis situations like this, not just emergency, which would come with supplemental pay, 2 times the pay, 3 times the pay, or
Mhm.
whatnot. Crisis. And again, a crisis, this is still not a crisis yet. But if it was a crisis, I mean, you would expect we're going to be in this for a couple weeks. It's not going to be a matter of days most of the time. And it's the tough discussions we're having originally because as responders and crisis managers, we know it's going to take time. Sometimes we're lucky and it goes away very quickly in a matter of hours, if not days. But most of the time when it gets bad, it's a matter of weeks. So working for weeks long engagement like this in crisis mode, it's not an emergency change where you're going to pay someone for 3 hours extra that's pre-approved by the union. It's something else. So again, to your point, Kim, and I can understand the unions are there to protect the workers, and a strike is a legitimate legal activity in terms of work. But when a crisis hits, it's not easy. So tough discussions. It's Saturday, so it's been fast and furious for the past year with the situation we're having. It seems to be under control. Most people are escaping the office, so that's a beautiful view of the toes and the sea. Let's hope the weekend is going to be as quiet as we would hope. And now we have this. It's not even 10 o'clock in the morning on that Saturday. Triage is paying off. That's what triage is. We get in and we try to look at what's volatile, what's in our face, and what's usually critical and obvious to orient the forensics. And unfortunately, they found out that there's a suspicious account that's been found within the CRM ecosystem that seems to spell Microsoft, but the I has been replaced by an exclamation mark. So it's Microsoft. And it's got admin privileges on the CRM, and the creation dates back to 2 months ago. Unfortunately, this is the kind of thing we didn't want to find, but it's good that Triage found it. So what does it do for our situation? Does it change the criticality of the case at this point? You would expect. What would be the process to escalate this? Again, it's an information. What does it mean? We don't know yet, but it's there, at least as a fact. There's work to do, right? And it's Saturday, 9:30 in the morning. Any feedback on this before we move on?
Well, I just think that there needs to be dialogue with the service provider, with all of the people that are involved with it to answer those technical questions. Depending on the outcome of those, then the business questions may need to be changed or addressed.
It may be legitimate, right? It sounds
Yeah, it could
legitimate.
be. It could be somebody's, created some account and they're, a bit sloppy. Is it good form? No. Is it something that might be? Could be. I guess that needs to be looked at. Someone needs to answer that question. And it really depends on who should have access to that and who has done that. Um, it need to be investigated.
Absolutely. As a hacker, Paul, would you use Microsoft written like this? I know I sure would. It seems legitimate. It reads from far away. Um, but in this case, IT comes back and say, you know what? No, Microsoft spelled like this, not us, not us. Doesn't mean it's malicious yet, but it's not IT. They would not do that. It's not part of the procedure, and it sounds sketchy. In a case like this, please go ahead, Kim.
Oh, I was going to say the other thing is, and this is from experience, when we find accounts that we don't know, what they are, and we see something that looks a bit suspicious and that we aren't sure whether it's authorized, we might disable that account immediately just before any other harm can be done. Because if the threat actor is in the system and has created an account, right, they may see that something is going on, it's being investigated, and they may look to cover their tracks more aggressively and be able, or start using other backdoors that they've got and do other things. So there are some things technically that need to be done to make sure that we're not actually tipping off what we're doing. And also that account can't be used for any more damage or any potential damage until we figure out until we get a proper answer about who created it and why.
I think it's
That's well
also
said. Please go ahead,
uh,
Paul.
that the first thing I'd ask them to do is to check what permissions that account's got as well.
Yeah,
Because if it's
exactly.
got, you've got a massive problem. Whereas if they're like just a normal front end user, then you've got less problems potentially.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it puts pressure on identity, right? It's one of the name of the game I can see in many organizations. Identity, IAM, identity and access management, and PAM, privilege access management, and the whole bucket of what this is. Managing identities with Azure, with those Oktas that are outsourced, with hybrid, Entra ID, which used to be Azure AD, and on-prem AD. So all those identity systems that need to be synchronized to one another and all the places where a threat actor can get leverage and tamper with identities. I think it's the key to the war that's playing on the hackers
Mhm.
versus us defenders. It's central to everything. We need identities to operate, but those identities are used against us and those systems also. I don't know if you want to feedback on this, but that's what I see, and I don't see it.
Well, in your original profile of Greenbit, it did say that they had a lot of old technology and also a lot of service providers and cloud applications, I think it was.
Yes, ma'am.
Um,
Yes.
that is a recipe for lots of things could be going on here, particularly with old unsupported legacy technology, tends to have bigger problems where some of the systems that you're talking, if they have a proper privileged access management system, that would be great. But if they've got a lot of legacy technology, they might not have just as an indicator, and so, here we are making some assumptions. But absolutely, I agree with Paul. We definitely need to be looking at what kind of privileges are involved there and locking that down until we can figure out more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So in this case, we propose the concept of a war room. So we don't want to overuse the term war, but it's one of those terms that's used in the business. So the crisis meeting, you would say. So typically that crisis meeting, depending on now it's a Saturday, right? And it's a long weekend. But typically, you want as much VIP stakeholders and decision makers in there, but how much is too much in those cases? And the reason why we're talking about the war room here, because we already had the crisis committee, if you want, which is the incident commander, the tech lead, the business lead, and whoever they wanted to bring to the table to try and figure out what's going on there. But when it turns into more of a crisis, so at some point and depending on the company, when the crisis process is very well defined, it takes over the cyber incident response plan and the activities that were going on. Some other times they're just going to follow as an overseeing organization. So there's not a single model in place. But at one point, it's the kind of events where usually I have way too many people at my meetings because it interests a lot of people. It's still very early. We don't have all the information, but it gets critical enough in terms of flavor that everybody wants a piece of it. I don't know what your feedback would be on this, but it's the kind of it's usually where not I, but we lose control in terms of management because it starts to spin.
I would agree with you, though it maybe the fact that it's on a weekend will be a saving grace here because a lot of those people are
Yeah,
they're not on
away.
board on the weekend, right? They've gone off for their long weekend, and so they don't really know anything's going on. If it was during the business day, Monday to Friday, yeah, you might get more hangers on. Um, yeah, absolutely, who attends the war room and who leads it should be defined in the incident management or in the crisis management plan. And you're right, in an organization that's mature, there are both, and how they interact and who's in charge are clearly defined in those things. And nobody needs to be precious about it. Who leads it should be based on those critical documents, those documents and policies.
That's well said. Hopefully, there's not too much politics at Greenbit than what we see at other companies. Because sometimes those politics, they get a long
Yeah.
way. Um, Severity has been escalated to medium in that aspect. So again, the incident management process in the organization should have those qualitative and quantitative criteria in terms of speed, mobilization, and the velocity of what we need to do, and especially how much we can retain our people to work on something. And those considerations should be part of what the unions will obey and support when stuff happens because we're going to need mobilization. So the war room has been convened by video conference in that aspect, and that includes external partners, including Cremate themselves and the stakeholders involved. And we can notice that the salespeople are also in that war room. The questions are typical. What do we know? What do we don't know? So the unknown unknowns are always tough ghosts to chase. You mentioned it in that aspect. In the essence of time, we're going to move on a little bit. It's Saturday and it's noon. As you said previously, because you guys are so good, the war room has decided that, hey, we need to figure out what the hell is this Microsoft account. And the decision is made to keep the CRM offline until we know more because it affects the CRM. Who knows what else? So that would have been communicated to the VP of sales at this point, that pushy person. It turns into a very personal persona, even though the story doesn't mention it, but I can feel it and hear that VP was not convenient as a person. So it's been said. Now, how do we communicate? Should we communicate? Again, like you said, Kim, it may be a blessing that it's a weekend and nobody cares right now because they're off on vacation. If it was a normal business day, they would be in your office breathing down your neck, most probably. So that would be the toughest part. Get off my back. We need to figure it out. So an investigation has been kicked off, okay, for that Microsoft account. Now the question will be, how do we address an investigation like this across the whole world, across all the entities, across those different time zones? And it's a weekend, and I would not expect things to be fast, right? There's the central systems we have access to. Those may be more convenient, like those Oktas and those Entra ID and the main Active Directories. But everything else that is legacy in sub-entities that we just acquired and that haven't been onboarded into our IT, again, we're always as weak as the weakest links. And this is what I'm scared about at this point. So it's very distributed. So that image was just meant to express that. It's not going to be a fast and easy investigation.
So just
Please,
question,
please, ma'am.
entity is like a business unit or is entity an identity?
A business unit, a BU,
Oh,
a
thank
BU.
you.
Yes, I'm
Great.
sorry.
That's what I
Corporate.
thought. I just wanted to be clear on that.
Yes, please. I'm sorry. Yes, yes, please. Thank you for
So
confirming the
so it's
language.
it's
So a
not that
business
that
unit.
this account has, touched or gotten involved with 30 identities or user accounts. It's
No.
these are business units. Okay, great.
Yes, absolutely. Yet. It did not yet. So yes, the business entities, legal entities, business units across the whole world. So it's the typical mess you would expect, right? Because you need to reach out to all of them so that they do those investigations, and some of them will just say, "I have nobody here able to tell that," especially on that long weekend. But we don't have the tools, we don't have the skills. Some others may just say, "You know what? You, HQ, is supposed to support me because you charge back in your chargeback model. I do some IT, but SOC, SecOps, and everything, it's somewhere else, right? So you tell me, boss, but I don't investigate. You're going to have to come and find out. So that's where we get into technical IT office politics for very good reasons. And again, the problem here is not technical. You're charging me for this. So come and investigate, but how am I going to be able to do this, even if I have a SOC or a SecOps team? It's a worldwide thing. So it's going to be a challenge for sure. No surprise.
These have you already covered.
Um, please, please,
Um,
please.
I haven't heard about cyber insurance, and apologies if I missed it, but if you've got cyber insurance, like they should have been involved in the conversation at some point, like as soon as you knew, because they normally throw a bunch of resources at it, or at least um, give you the money back for throwing a bunch of resources at it. And then normally they've got some people that are on the list. I mean, in my experience, the people that were on the list of people that we had retainers with never bothered to show up when we had an actual incident, and we ended up getting Deloitte to come in with a significant, heavy backhaul of people that knew what they were talking about, that have seen this before, like potentially have seen this kind of attack before. They'll understand what they're looking for. They'll know the modus operandi of the attacker, etc. So there's a whole bunch of that would also run alongside this, as far as, especially when you're trying to sort like that global map you just had out. A normal IT or a normal SOC doesn't have the capacity to deal with that kind of range, whereas a cybersecurity specialist firm that deals with incident management possibly will have a better capability.
I
Very well
agree with
said.
parts of that, Paul, because it's interesting. Depending on what the organization is, there might be, like, having worked in public sector where we have public sector SOCs, they're pretty sophisticated and they're pretty good, and they've got reached out to national elements to be able to help do analysis. But we also had, as an agency, also had a DFIR contract like you've described, but with another organization. And then there's the matter of insurance, and that one's interesting because having worked for a couple organizations where we reviewed the insurance policy, the cyber insurance policies, while we should report to the cyber insurance organization, the insurer, that we had an incident, they want to run alongside and see how we handle it, and then they'll decide whether they will pay a claim or not. And that is a way that the industry is evolving. There are, and I've done a lot of with legal, done a lot of contract reviews of cyber insurance contracts. So it's very interesting to understand what the terms and conditions are and also all the limitations. So it would be great if they would throw lots of resources and we would be guaranteed to have money to pay for, all the things that we're going to need. But frankly, we procured our own DFIR and our own cyber contracts with specialists to be able to have somebody that was working directly for us, doing what we wanted, not doing what the insurer was doing. Because in some cases, the insurer had just huge limitations built into the contract. So it's great when you can get access to those things. But I definitely agree that there are other players that would be involved based on these, right? So when we, because in two of the places I worked, our teams were not 724. I definitely had a retainer agreement with an organization that would go 724 for me as soon as I needed them to. So I just place a call and they were already 724, 365, and they would just pick up our stuff. And some of those were already had access to some of our monitoring and our systems. Others we had prearranged agreements, and they would do whatever we needed them to do. This is very helpful.
Yeah, that's a very good discussion. And I've seen organizations where the link with their insurer was so tight, it was specific to them, that the IRP in the organization was the risk VP picking up the phone and calling the insurer for whatever the
Oh,
reason. So
wow.
as soon as it smelled, the insurer was getting involved. It's the only place I saw this. And to my great surprise, it was working pretty well because of the dynamic that we saw in the previous presentation, right? You can sit in your victim or requester seat. The insurer brings in the DFIR, the breach coach, and
Yeah.
deals with the vendors. But again, what kind of premium do you pay for this? That's the
Oh,
question
geez.
I never got an answer to.
I know the answer to that because I've seen some of those briefings and I've seen some of those contracts, and it really ends up being that's a business decision to basically decide
Mm,
should do the limitations and and constraints in this insurance agreement and service provider agreement, would we be better to self-insure, or should we pay this money because the deductibles are very big.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, extending to the maritime industry, where we know that they have those P&I clubs where co-insurance between the non-insured, because
Yeah.
those maritime cargo shippers have so great losses that they're not insurable in some aspects. So it brings
Yeah.
mutual insurances between a vertical. Very, very, very interesting. It's not as distributed as I would have thought it would in
No,
2026.
it's not as distributed because actually there's a very small number of underwriters in that entire industry. And that's, and so it's not going to be as distributed. Now they may have teams that they work with, but that's anyway, don't want to go down a rat hole. It's a very
Yeah, but
interesting
that's
discussion to talk about insurance because cyber insurance, the landscape has been changing a lot.
so much, so much. So, in the essence of time, for the last 10 minutes, I'm going to move on with a couple of oh shit moments, okay? Pardon the language, just to cue you and to keep that into more discussion. So, the answers are not coming fast from the distributed teams. Greenbit has made the decision to not involve the insurer just yet. We're Sunday morning at 8 of that long weekend, okay? Forensics have had issues offboarding, downloading the data from the CRM. So the next best option has been decided to send physical hard drives, so copies on physical hard drives, and just mail that out to the forensicators because they need access to the data. So that decision was made at that point. The triage has completed. It's Sunday at 10:30 in the morning. Unfortunately, another detail that just came up is that the investigators suspect there was anti-forensic, so defensive measures and traces of tampering that would be coherent and consequent with malicious activities of someone trying to cover their traces, expressed politely. So now only the full investigation will prove that. So it justifies the forensics activities that we were trying to do. Now the hard drives are going to, the data is going to be copied and the data is going to be mailed. So the answers from that full forensics are not going to come in the next few hours. It's going to be most probably multiple days, if not weeks. But it justifies what we had planned anyways, right? So anti-forensics as a new detail. Um, Still Sunday, 10:45. The answers come in. So we have a very dedicated team of people in Brazil, and they found a VPN remote connection activity that uses that infamous Microsoft account with the exclamation mark. So now it feels that we don't have a cybersecurity problem isolated and constrained and confined to the CRM ecosystem. It's been used for remote access in another country. Again, we were blurry about the physical presence of the CRM. It's cloud-based, but we remember that HQ was in Monaco, in Europe. So now it crossed into America. So we seem to have a worldwide problem. Lots of very interesting questions to ask from there, but moving on because it doesn't go better from there. The war room reconvenes. It's Sunday at 12 o'clock. So now the information is passed and the conclusions, the partial conclusions, the evidence now suggests that we have suspicious CRM activity, we have gaps in the logs, we have suspected anti-forensics that feels like tampering, and VPN traces in another region, which makes it feel like a more global compromise than what we would have imagined, or at least hoped for. Moving on still. The decision is made to keep the CRM offline and mandate that full forensics investigation. Because up to now, the investigation was scoped around the CRM. Now we're moving the investigation and it's extending it into VPN concentrators, firewalls, or other technologies that may support that in another country, another region, somewhere else in the company. So the scope just got higher. The severity is raised to high. Please, Kim.
So have we invoked the BCP yet?
Nope, Greenbit has not have not spoken about BCP just yet,
I think
but
Someone
it's
should be
coming.
sacked. Someone should be sacked for that. Anyway, sorry.
I'm taking notes. Somebody should be sacked at Sunday
Someone should be
at what
sacked for
p.m.
not saying
No,
the
you're
word
right.
the word BCP.
would we not
Because as soon as we decide that we've got to leave it on or offline, and it's going to take multiple days, and it's a critical application, the BCP needs to be invoked. So that's just throwing that out there.
would we not
Yeah,
did we
very
not
true.
just on Friday before we made the decision when we were taking it offline?
I don't like, I just haven't heard. I think we
We
talked about
talked about looking
what were
at
the options? Were there any additional options? What could we offer? But it actually, in all of this, you know, I don't see anything that says, oh, we're running with the BCP. Whatever the BCP says, we will do for this critical application, CRM. I don't see anything that has said that in here. And if
No,
we were
you're
doing
right.
that, then that's a different discussion. We're going to keep the main CRM offline. We're going to invoke the BCP. That's going to restore or put a limited CRM capability on at some other service provider or in some other way or whatever it says. It's like I don't know what it says, but that's what that would be that discussion is not happening in these boxes. So I think that's the point that I'm making is that discussion should have been made earlier, definitely should be on the table now.
so
Uh,
back to your point, I wanted second.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. It's very late
no, no,
here.
no.
It's like, oh, it's almost 11:30 p.m. So if I'm a bit punchy, my apologies.
No, no,
I'm loving this. So again, a scenario is just a scenario. I'm taking notes for next time, but the BCP and insurance aspects come a little bit later. Allow me to just slideshow a couple of the slides to just wrap
Okay.
up this conversation because it's been almost 2 hours already. So we moved in into the Monday. So the weekend is over, and right now, no, they haven't gone into full BCP, even if implicitly the IRP at the high, because we're in a high severity incident that's been escalated from the VPN intrusion that was found. I'm going faster with intrusion, but with the remote access that was found. So I assume that the BCP and DR considerations are already in the making, but the scenario doesn't speak about it right now. Forensics copy have been shipped. We're Monday at 8 o'clock in the morning. Greenbit has decided to move with a direct contract with the investigation firm that initially was under cremate as the vendor so that the investigation scope can be extended. So they sign the contract, a DFIR contract, straight with the external provider. Okay. Journalists are starting to call in. What for? Well, sometimes it happens. So we have a journalist calling in with loaded question about CRM maintenance. Go ahead, Kim.
And
I
it's
missed
just
that.
like they said, "Oh, we see that your CRM line is all your system is offline. Would you care to make a comment about that?"
Yeah. Would you see that happening?
Oh, we know that happens. We know that basically there are journalists that basically are always looking for a little lead on that, and then Monday morning there will be a little piece in the newspaper.
And it's
The
never
client will go
pleasant.
the client will go absolutely bonkers,
I,
or that's
I,
Please, please, please.
or I wouldn't advise to tell any staff that there's been a cyber attack.
no.
You as small a circle as possible, because as soon as staff know, the public know, right? And as soon as the
Yep.
public know, the option is that we've lost customer data. And then the ICO are asking questions and everything else. So once we know that you've not lost customer data and they've just got into your system, then it's a case of keep that circle tight and just say, it's maintenance on the system. It's going to go down for the weekend, and then it hasn't come back up. And then the teams that use the CRM should automatically look at their business continuity plan to know what they're going to do when it hasn't come back up on Monday morning. I would proactively have forced the business to start thinking about what would happen if it didn't come up or come back, and make sure that all the teams have the critical stuff of the people they're going to talk to on Monday backed out on Friday night, so they know who they're going to talk to, etc. And would know more about what the impact to the business would have been anyway. But yeah,
Exactly. And if there's a crisis communications plan, that should outline what
yeah,
who and the communications executive in charge of that crisis communication plan should be involved in the war room activities and should be thinking about what, and managing the communication. So having worked in an organization where we ran a TT, a tabletop like this with the executive team, and one of the outcomes was they were like, wow, we don't have a crisis communications plan for cyber incidents. So they had it for everything else, but not
Except
for a
cyber.
cyber incident. And what they learned from the tabletop exercise was there are things in here that would not be addressed by the crisis communications plans we have already. So we did a piece of work we brought somebody in to do that as a project.
Nice. Which is a success, right? It's made for this. Like
Oh
finding
yeah.
those gaps are super precious, but it's kind of surprising. And there's some kind of backtrack after this, like, oh, we should have thought of this. Yes, but now you know, right? It's the lessons are good.
Yeah.
Um, just to throw a couple injects before we let you go because it's late already. So the scenario was planning for a UK team doing some investigation, and they found traces of that suspicious Microsoft account logging in into a domain controller, an Active Directory, which is for the non-technical people that may listen to this after the fact. It's part of the identity management of the company and more. So it
I'm
seems we
sorry.
have,
I'm gonna chime in and say it's the crown
please,
jewels. So it's the
it
crown
is.
jewels, right? So if you've lost control of Active Directory or have any hostile activity in there, game over, right? I don't want to say game over, but it's a pretty serious cybersecurity event. I hope we've escalated the severity of the event now.
Absolutely. So quick slide to show the why Active Directory is a crown jewel, like you're saying. So well, Kim, it's game over without being game over.
Yep.
Um, which means at this point we have a most major problem, an even bigger problem than we had
Yeah.
originally. We had pretty
Well,
much a full
I'm just
enterprise
going to add that,
compromise. Please.
it's really big. The business need to be told that basically it means we can't trust any transactions that are happening on any of our systems at all. Um, and so from a point of view about what to do about this, it has a very chilling effect on, it's got a lot of chilling consequences that are going to mean a very difficult or unhappy set of circumstances that we're going to be in to rebuild or restore. So yeah.
For those of you that went through this, I mean, the feeling in the throat and in the stomach at this point, not good at all, because we know we're gonna be in for quite a ride to
Months,
rebuild on
weeks,
this. Months,
months, weeks. It's weeks, months now.
I've lived through
unfortunately.
it was 3 or 4 months
Yep.
and painful because systems that hadn't been reset, you had to check that you could reset them before you reset the whole of Active
Yep.
Directory. It was painful.
Absolutely. So in the organizations I've been in, this is a like a really big thing that I campaigned for really hard to actually do a complete assessment of AD to make sure that we remediated everything so that we could and then had it locked down. So obviously if they've got uh, breaches and impacts in AD already, they're in the do.
They're in the do.
Sorry,
Unfortunately for
that's a technical term.
well, yeah, we're in the do. It's full technical term. It should be part of the BCP.
Yep.
It's more than critical. For the recording, I'm going to be able to stay here for a couple more minutes with you guys. But for the recording, we're at the 2 hours mark here. So we played through the tabletop and we got to the Tuesdays, from the Thursday to the Tuesday. It's very compressed as a timeline. We're at the point where we have a confirmed breach of our Active Directory, at least part of it. But usually it's just a matter of technicalities to go from small breach to big breach. As Kim said, it's not game over, but it feels like it. So we're at that point, and that's a story that could be continued at a later time. So thank you everyone for joining the session. Thank you again, Marina and GCBR, for making this happen. I propose that these kind of activities are carried on, and we have multiple more experiences facilitated by other people around this table and perhaps built in a collaborative manner. So thank you for being with me on this. We never know where we're gonna get, but we got far, and your interactions were priceless, music to my ears.